So I'll let everybody kind of enter in the chat. But if you go scroll all the way up to the top of the chat, there'll be that letter that we sent out last week. TAP did send that out to, I think, all the member reps, consortia leads, and directors and co-chairs. However, if you're a fiscal person, accounting person, certifier, maybe you didn't get it. So we'll repost that a couple of times in the chat during the course of the webinar. It has a lot of good information, examples, FAQs, and we'll go over that today. We're not sure how long today's webinar is going to take, but if we do get done early, we can entertain other NOVA questions once we answer all the questions related to the program area reporting. So with that, let's look at today's agenda. So I'll briefly go over the requirements, which were in the letters. The letter. We'll talk about hours of instruction. What do we mean by that? We'll talk about operating costs, and we'll talk about the fund sources. And then Nicole will walk us through the NOVA processing of this information. And then we can cover your questions, or I can review the FAQs that we put in the letter, either or both. Okay. So, budget bill requirement. So this came about in the 18-19 budget that was signed July 1st of this year. It requires that we're supposed to take the 17-18 data that has been passed, that was ended June 30th, and we're supposed to provide hours of instruction by program area and operational costs by program area. And so we'll go over this in a little bit more detail, but when we mean operational costs, we mean all costs, building, in-kind, overhead, admin, you name it. And when we're accounting for those operating costs or operational costs, we want to know which fund source. The legislature is specifically interested in fees. So if you're a K-12 adult school and you're charging a fee, we want to know, how much that is, or if you get donations or you get another grant or a contract other than the usual grants and contracts. And if you're a community college and you are collecting fees, even on non-credit, they collect fees for parking and student fees and books. And so I'm not sure how much access you have to that information, but that's kind of the information we're looking for, because we can tell the story about what's the true cost of running an adult education program, whether it's at the K-12 adult school or at the community college non-credit. And this is important too. We expect adult ed program members to enter their best estimate given the information data from their local and state level systems. So we understand sometimes fund sources are not broken out by program area. We understand that these funds are bundled together with other programs, and so it's difficult to really get a true cost. So we're accepting estimates and prorations and things like that, and do your best. We don't want you to spend so much time on this that this becomes this huge labor that takes hours and hours. And we'll try to go through some scenarios where you can use some data sources, and then if you do get into some proration or estimating, we can identify those too. Because this is the first go-around on this, and there will be estimates and prorations, we're still going to give everybody till February 15th of next year. Originally, it was going to be by the end of this year, but we realized that was going to be too difficult. And so February 15th will be the deadline to input this information by member, by program area into NOVA. And we'll have some screenshots on what it looks like later. Okay, so here's the, I think Veronica just posted the link again. So this is what it looks like if you haven't seen it. If you click on Veronica's link, she also posted the link for due dates. Thank you, Veronica. This is what the letter looks like, and And here's a little background on the reporting instructions. It was issued last week. It includes the initial 2-page memo, background, definitions, methodologies, examples, screenshots, process steps, and FAQs. And there's the, and Veronica put it in the chat for easy access. You can just click on that and open that up. But a lot of good information in there. It really helps you, follow the process steps and understand what we're talking about. But we'll cover a little bit at a high level today. So some of the key facts is when we say program areas, we're talking about the 7 adult ed program areas. We're not talking about the 10 non-credit program areas, which are different. We're not talking about the 5 AB 86 areas or something else. It's just the 7 adult ed program areas. And when we say terms, the term hours of instruction, that's defined as a reportable individual that has at least 1 hour of program-related services or instruction in our systems, because that's how we defined reporting into TOPS-Pro in 1718. We said we're collecting all reportable individuals, so that would be 1 hour or more. So if they got services, we're collecting that. If they got up to 12 hours, then they would be counted in the instructional program cohort, so to speak. And so we want to make sure we capture all those students and all those hours. I know there's some kind of edge or cases like independent studies and things like that. That's kind of an anomaly on where there's not any, the teacher works like 3 hours and the student is 20, 30 hours of schoolwork and stuff like that. So those are kind of specific cases that we can take offline, but for the most part, it's just 1 hour or more services and instruction. And then the time period, 1 second, please. All right. Sorry. Okay. Sorry about that. I had to turn off my phone. The time period that we're using for 1718 is July 1st, 2017, ending June 30th, 2018. And so that's what we're looking at. That's what would be in TOPS-Pro. And then we're going to go over some other data sources as well. So next slide, hours of instruction. So if you want to, you can use TOPS-Pro because they've created a report, hours of instruction by program area for each member, and you can look at that. You can also use your local attendance system that has more accurate data than what's in TOPS-Pro. If you're a community college, you can use the CCFS or 320 reporting system for non-credit FTES. The only problem with that report is it's not broken out by program area, so somehow you would have to do some proration, or if you've set up a breakdown by program area, you could do that too. Or you could look at your TOPS-Pro report and look at the percentages of the breakout, and then you could use that for your 320. But then the 320 would have to be multiplied by, 525 hours. So you can only report hours into NOVA. And Nicole will show us that later. So we just need the total hours by program area. So you can't report FTES, you can't report ADA. It's got to be, somehow you got to convert those numbers into hours. Let me pause here. Andrea says, what if a student receives 30 minutes of counseling? Does that mean that the service for that student should not be reported? So for colleges and K-12, so colleges have kind of a policy and procedure for how they record their FTES. And so I'm not too sure, but I think there is a process, and it's maybe like at the 50-minute mark or something like that. So there are standards for how colleges report hours. In TOPS-Pro, And for the K-12, I'm sure we would follow the same methodology that we've been always following for WIOA 2 for counting hours. So Andrea, for services, I'm not sure. We'll have to maybe take a look at that, Andrea. I'm not sure if there would be a difference if you're reporting it for FTES services or instructional hours. Wouldn't they be the same? But we could talk about that. Okay, so moving on to operational costs. So this would be the true cost of running the adult ed programs. It would include utilities, space, custodial, overhead, equipment, as well as the normal day-to-day operational costs, which would be your instructional, your classified, benefits, supplies, etc. It would also include those admin costs. And so we're trying to get that true picture of running an adult ed program. I'll pause there. I'm not seeing any questions other than Andrea's on reporting student services, and we'll follow up with that. Alicia says, we report students receiving counseling under supportive services. Are we reporting only instruction, not supportive service? In TOPS-Pro, there's no place to put hours for supportive service. So, Alicia, there is a place to put services in TOPS-Pro. You can record those hours. So what I would do is contact CASAS at, I think it's aebg@casas.org. And we have been collecting hours for services in TOPS-Pro, so there is a way that is recorded in the 1718 file they're going to download. And so that information is available if you did report it. Now, if you didn't report it, you can't go back and try to put that in because those books are closed. But if it was reported, then you can access that information. Otherwise, you can go to your attendance systems. But if you're only counting instructional hours, then you would miss the service hours. Because remember, we're saying we're tracking reportable individuals 1 hour or more of services or instruction. And so that would enter into our calculation. So David says, does that mean we include dollars even if we did not claim them via AEBG? Yes, we're going to go over that a little bit. We're going to collect any fund source that contributed to the cost of running your program. So whether you got WIOA 2 or another form of apportionment or CalWORKs or LCFF, or you got a donation or you charged a fee, we want to account for all that funding if you have the ability to report that and do your best, because the legislature wants to see. The critical part of this is, the legislature is asking us for this information, and it behooves us to give accurate and correct data, because if they want to do a new funding model, or if they want to give us more funding or something like this, we have to show them what's the true cost of running our programs. And so if we don't have a good understanding of it, then how can they support us with providing us more money if we don't know that true cost? So Jose says, if ours exceeded the amount of AEP funding, do we include the portion not covered by these funds? Do we include the portion not covered? So let's say you got $1 million in AEP funding. Your true operational costs might be for that year $2 million. And so it's okay to include the other fund sources that you use to run your program. I'm not sure, Jose, if I answered your question, but you can exceed your AEP funding. We're not focused strictly on AEP funding. And when we get to the slide, you'll see that. DeHaren says, how will we the indirect, should we split it by program? So yeah, if you want to do some kind of proration for your admin, your indirect, those kind of things, you can do a percentage split. You can prorate it based on some kind of accepted methodology that your district uses. You can do it by student enrollment, however you want to use, but just use a consistent methodology. And that will be the problem. That's one of the flaws in this, is that we don't have any standards for, and we've never done operational costs. So I think this will get better over time. This will be our first round. I'm sure there'll be a little bit of misalignment. People will be calculating things a little differently, but got to start somewhere, and we'll start this year, and I think this will be an ongoing exercise that we'll do every year. So Bill says, what is the point of this? What are our costs to run our programs, and is what we spend our budget on? So Bill, you're only reporting your AEP budget to us, but your cost of running your program is much more than that. So if the legislature wants to, let's say the legislature says, well, we want to give you an extra $100 million, when the true cost of running adult ed is really $900 million, and so we're shorting ourselves $300 million, and so they want to know what that true cost is, and so that's why they're asking for this information. And I think that kind of information can only help us understand how we run our programs. Okay. And Crystal says, do you know where you report hours for support services in TopsPro? I think there's a way when you do the entry record and you report the hours, you can select a bubble for supportive services. And so that's something I would follow up with TopsPro with the CASAS help desk. I don't think Jay writes on the call today, so I don't have the specific details on that, but we can follow up with that. And Alicia says, as we only marked that they received services and TOPS, we did not report hours. Okay, so then you wouldn't be able to report that if you didn't report the hours. Some people have been, I think, reporting the hours associated with that. Maybe that wasn't something that we were aware of. So we'll see. Like I said, this is first year. We might not have all those intricacies of the hours. We could just only do the best we have with what we have. So, and then Jan, what about workability 2? Yeah, we would include any funds that we're using to help with our students. And Sarah says, is this a one-time process? No, we're setting up in Nova, Sarah, to report every year. So this will be an ongoing thing. I think we'll get better at it every year. We'll probably align some of the stuff, like the questions that are coming up about TopsPro. We'll make sure people understand how to report service hours in there of someone less than 12 hours, how you report those hours and things like that. And Beth says, does this include non-AEP funds used for AEP program areas? Yes, so it would be like I said, the 7 program areas, regardless of fund source. So sometimes your CTE funds, you could charge a fee if you're a K-12 adult school. You could get a WIOA 1 ITA. You could get a grant from an employer to provide CTE. You could use your AEP funds. Maybe you get some CalWorks. Who knows? So it's those 7 program areas, regardless of fund source. So that's that true cost and the true operational costs. Okay, so Dana says it's in the update record in TopsPro. And then Alicia says, and this is okay, we can answer these questions. And then in a few minutes we'll move on. Should we estimate in-kind services? Yes, you should. Like if a librarian lets us use their space, or just actual costs. No, we do, Alicia, we do want to estimate in-kind services because that is a cost of running the program. So we really do need to show the legislature what's the cost of running these programs. It's not strictly the $521 million, it's a lot more than that. And Marianne says, Jay has me include service enrollments under other programs enrollment so I can include dates. Thank you, Marianne. So Bill says, so then to show dollars from AEP, any MOU, fees collected, I think I get it. Tired of the new rules. The game goalposts keep moving. Yeah, I think when we ask for money, the legislature wants to make sure that they're getting the bang for their buck, so they make us jump through these hoops in order to get additional funds. So now that we have this new administration, I'm sure they're going to use this information when people lobby for additional funds. So that's a good thing. The bad thing is we have to roll out and provide all this data. But hopefully the data is good and we can justify additional funding. That's why we go through this exercise. Lisa said Jay told us to mark it as supportive services unless we create a class for support services, and then she'll follow up with process. Okay, this is good. It kind of highlights some of the interesting instruction that we've been providing or technical assistance. So maybe this will hone in a little bit on our data collection. So I appreciate all the questions. And Alicia, yes, you should include private donations if you do have that. And Marianne, yes, if you do serve students with Title I or Title IV funding, that should also be included if you can separate that out. Okay, and then Shelley. So Shelley, what specific reports do we run in TopsPro? TopsPro is going to provide a special report for this exercise that will be available by member, and you'll just click on it and it'll show you hours of instruction by program area. So it'll be that simple. And Beth says, is there a formula or process for estimating the cost of in-kind services? No, we don't have any formula or process, but you can estimate and you can prorate. I would check with your accounting for a methodology that they would use for facility costs or in-kind or anything like that. Okay, let me pause there. I know we have some more questions. I'm going to move on to the next slide, just to remind you that some of these costs may be difficult to separate, kind of like we're seeing in the questions, or identify specifically to the adult ed non-credit programs. We encourage districts to prorate these costs and use an allocation methodology which would estimate the true cost of running the program. So it's year one. We're going to see what we can get. We'll probably have some follow-up to see maybe next year when we do this again, if we can get a little more standard methodology, like the questions we're getting, like how do you estimate in-kind, how would we calculate that, those kind of things. Okay, and then we're going to get into fund sources, and then I'll check back for questions. So we've already talked about a few of the fund sources. Not only will districts be entering the true cost of running the programs, they will also enter into NOVA the various fund sources that contributed to these operational costs. So you're not limited to just the 6 main fund sources that were listed in Education Code 84916. And those 6 are, I think they're WIO2, jail ed funds for K-12 adult schools, LCFF, non-credit apportionment, CalWORKS, and Perkins. So we're not strictly limiting it to that. Those were the 6 that were called out in the legislation. But we also want to see any kind of fees, and I think Bill referenced a lot of this, and other people referenced this in their chat responses. Contracted services, WIO1, Marianne mentioned WIO4, rehab, strong workforce, if you do get that, any student supports, grants, in-kind, donations. If you have the ability to track that down and break that out, we'd welcome that kind of information. So before we bring Nicole in, let me go back and see if I got all the questions. So Francisca says, we record services when students register and take the placement test, but not hours, since hours aren't counted until students are enrolled in a class. So, we've encouraged people to track reportable individuals. So that might be something, Francisca, that you might want to think about for this year, because we have instructed people to track reportable individuals 1 hour or more. And so if you're waiting till they get into the instructional course, you might be missing all those student hours between 1 and 12. Or if they're talking to a counselor and maybe they don't come back, then you lose record of that. But you would have to enroll them, I think, to get that demographic information to put them in the top spread. So something to think about, and we can also mention this to Costas as well. Peggy says, based on churches in our area, we figure they're charging about $1 per square foot for a room. This is how we estimate Inkind facilities. Thank you, Peggy. Alicia, will that be added to Nova? We do have an Inkind that I think, or a drop-down menu that Nicole will show you. So let me just finish the questions and I'll turn it over to Nicole to walk you through it. Does Nova have a column for non-AEBG fund expenditures? Yes, we'll show you. So don't be confused. So Nova, we have this quarterly Nova reporting process for AEP funds or AEBG funds. This exercise that we're talking about is separate. It's on a separate page. It has its own chart. So it's a little different than what you're used to seeing when you're doing your Nova quarterly expenses for the adult ed program. And so when Nicole goes over this, you'll see what I mean. Let's see. Alicia, will you give us a tool or recommendation for what allocation methodology we should use? Right now, we don't have any standards because I would fall back on your accounting or business services, how you account for space. There's no uniform methodology. There might be under WIOA for calculating for MOUs and in-kind and space use, but those MOUs are going to vary from district to district on how you calculate, space usage if you're doing, in-kind matches, things like that. So we're not going to get into giving everybody one set of standards, and that's something we'll have to look at. But right now, we can't do that because there's no real uniform standard across the state. And when rooms are offered for free. So Bill, yeah, that's the same question. We don't really have any guidance there because there's no state policy or template. WIOA has some guidance when you're doing your MOUs. I don't know if it gets into specific cost sharing, but that's something I would look at is maybe in your MOU if you are working with a workforce partner and how you negotiated in kind or lease space or things like that. We provide classes in locations where space are donated for free for our program. Okay. All right. And then when do you estimate that Topscore will have the special report available for determining hours of instruction? They said they would have it this week. We'll put out, what we'll do is, Linda, when Costas posts that, we will send out a message to everyone through TAP, letting everybody know that that report has been posted. Okay, and then Bill's question will be handled by Nicole. I'm going to turn it over to Nicole, and Nicole's going to walk you through this.
Okay, thank you, Neil. Hi, everyone. I'm going to walk you through the NOVA pages for completing the program area report. So as Neil mentioned, this report is in a separate place in NOVA. It's not tied to your expenditure reporting. It's in its own area. It will have its own timeline. I believe it's going to be an annual report, and we're going to have the ability to report your estimates and then the ability to report actuals. For this year, since we kind of had a short timeline or runway time to get this out, I believe we want your actuals reported by the February 15th date. And Neil, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we need the actuals by that date. And then moving forward into following years, you will have an opportunity to report your estimates, and then at a later time, you'll be reporting your actuals or your final report. So to access this report, you would log into NOVA, and on the left-hand side, on the blue navigation pane, you would click under Funds, click on AEBG, And under AEBG, you'll find the section that's labeled Program Area Reporting. Once you click on that link, it will then take you to the Program Area Reporting dashboard, where you can search for your consortia using the filters at the top, or you can kind of scroll through the screens. If you don't see your consortia listed, it's probably because you haven't completed your 1819 CFAD yet. With the latest release that we launched on October 15th, we did deploy kind of a logic or rules of operation, and so certain things need to be done before you can move on to the next step. So if you have not yet completed your 1819 CFAD, you will not see your name, your consortia name in this list. And also, I'll just take a moment, just a little reminder, I think we still have 10 or 11 consortia that still have to complete their CFAD, and I realize that's because we had the additional COLA dollars that were awarded to us, and we were kind of working through that. Also, you want to make sure that under the year filter that you've selected 1718. Because we're already in the 1819 year, NOVA has created both years to report on, but you want to make sure you're reporting in the correct year. And so we're reporting for fiscal year 1718, and you want to make sure that you select that. You can do that here from this dashboard, or also when you click into the next page. So once you find your consortium and you click on the link for your consortia, it then takes you to the program area reporting page for your consortia. Under the year filter at the top of the page, you want to make sure that that says 2017-18. And so this is kind of the landing page for the program area reporting for your consortia, and you would see your members listed. I just want to show this screenshot here. This is the same page for another consortia, but this shows a non-funded member who's a voting-only member, but they don't receive funding. So in those cases, the reports for those members are optional. We've indicated that. I've highlighted it on this screenshot, but you would see that member's name in the list, and you would see optional next to their name. That means that if they don't complete the report, it will not prevent any certification or submissions. It should not. But if you do have funded members, any members that receive funding, this report will be required. So then once you click on your district, you will then see the workflow for this report. And this is kind of how every deliverable in NOVA will have this kind of submenu, this workflow submenu that you'll start to recognize as you complete things. So for the program area report, the workflow items that you need to complete are the program area hours, the leverage funds, and then as always there's a preview and submit section. And the preview section is where you will just preview everything that you've entered and then submit when you're ready. This screenshot shows the program area hours section where you will enter the total hours of instruction by program area. So to get to the next screen, you can click on Next at the top of the page, or you can click on the Leverage Funds section directly from the workflow, which will take you here to this screen. And this is where you will enter your expense totals for each fund by program area, and you'll see the chart here where you will enter your funds by program area. This next screen shows if you have something that's not already included on the list that you need to add another fund, you would select that fund from the drop-down window located at the bottom of the screen. And as you can see here, this is where you can add donations or in-kind contributions. Some of the questions that came up earlier, this is how you can add those sources to this chart. And once you've completed both sections, the program area hours and the leverage funds, you would then be taken to the preview page. This is where you'll review everything that you've entered and click submit when ready. As I've mentioned, we're going to have kind of two layers for submission. We're going to have the ability to save estimates and then the ability to submit actuals. So in this screenshot, this shows that this report is now ready to be saved as estimates. And so you would click the Save Estimates button here on the top left side of the screen. This screenshot shows the report where the estimates have been saved. In order to submit actuals, we would navigate back to this area, follow these same steps, get to the preview page, and submit your actuals. I believe whatever information you have already entered will stay. So you would only at the time you're ready to submit your actuals, you would only need to update anything that needs to be updated. Otherwise, all of the information would stay intact, and so you don't have to redo the entire report all over again. Again, as I mentioned, we'd want you to complete both of these steps by February 15th. So I understand this year is going to be a little weird. We're not going to have kind of the runway time in between submitting your estimates and submitting your actuals. So in this case, you might need to kind of go in here, submit your estimates, and then go back in on the same day and submit your actuals if you're completing this report in February. And this screenshot shows where the actual reports have been submitted. You can see here where you can go ahead and unsubmit your actuals if you need to. And then this screenshot shows once all reports have been submitted, once the actuals reports have been submitted for each of the member agencies, then the consortia lead will have the ability to navigate to this page and click on Certify. So it's one certification button for all reports. And that's kind of the basic process in NOVA. So let me see if I can scroll through this chat to see if there's any questions.
So Nicole, I do have a couple of questions for you. I can summarize. Okay. So for this year, we're only doing estimates because this is new, and so if they click on estimate and actual just to submit the estimates for 17-18, that shouldn't be a problem, right? Because next year in 18-19, we'll do the regular cycle where in September we're reporting estimates, and by the end of the year we're doing the actual. But this year, because it's new, we're allowing people a little breathing room to do estimates. Do you see any problems in NOVA with doing that submission one after the other?
So you mean for this year we're only submitting estimates, and then next year we'd do the estimates and the actuals? Right.
But they would still have to click on the actual button to submit, or would it still post by just hitting estimate?
I believe I'll have to check with the developers, but I believe we would need to have it certified in order to move into the next step. So we would actually need to click on the actual button. But I think there could be an understanding that these are estimates for this year. We would still be able to generate a report of the information. I believe we can still pull a report of estimates if people only submit as estimates. But I do have to check with the developers if it will impact us if we don't do a submit actuals and then we don't certify, how that disrupts the logic or the order of operations of things. So I'll have to check into that.
Okay, thank you. So just to remind everybody, we do have an entity that will be developing a report, and so in this report we will highlight things like the in-kind methodology, the difficulty in prorating and estimating stuff, how the TOPS Pro system or the attendance system or the community college 320 report, the possible problems we've had with calculating things there. So they will highlight some of the barriers and the caveats to the information that we'll be reporting. So it's not like we're going to give the legislature just, here's our hours by program and here's all the money. We're going to do some analysis, and we'll do some kind of reporting and narrative on what this process entailed, what are the barriers, those kind of things. So don't think that it's just going to be blindly giving the legislature this information. We'll be qualifying all this information that we give them. But Emma did have a question for Nicole. I'm going to try to get to it. So Nicole, Emma says, what if a member is funded in 18-19 but was not in 17-18 will that hold back the process?
I believe that that member should not show in the 17-18 list because, as you'll notice, when you select year, it kind of filters for the members for that year. That's my understanding of how it works. But if it doesn't, please let me know. But I believe only the 17-18 members should show when you select year 17-18. But please let me know if that's not the case.
All right, thank you. And then Peggy says, I assume we combine service hours and instructional hours and put it in each box as a cumulative total. That's correct. So when Costas is developing their report of hours of instruction, they're doing the same thing. They're combining any service hours and instructional hours that you've reported by program area. Now, if you didn't signify a program area, it would be difficult for TOPS Pro to assign it to a program area unless you made that decision. So there could be an issue where we do have a lot of people in the system generating hours, but you didn't attach a program to them, so they're just listed as services. There's no way we can, unless you do some kind of proration, attach that to a program area. So that's something you might want to think about when you look at your attendance system or you look at the TOPS Pro report. And you might want to go back in and qualify some of that information because there would be that area of services and hours associated with that if you were tracking it. And if someone comes in for counseling and they didn't say they were going to go into CTE or ABE or ESL, then you wouldn't bubble the program area in TOPS Pro. So they could get left out if you didn't follow up on that. And then Kathy said, what if a member received funds? I think I answered that one. They do not have an adult ed program. They provide support with job developers other than members. So Kathy, on that one, if they tracked it in their attendance system, then you could report that. But if they didn't track it, you can't make it up. There'd be no way of knowing what the hours were. So in that case, hopefully they used an attendance system. I wasn't sure if they were using TOPS Pro. It didn't sound like it, knowing the situation that you were describing. And so if they didn't have any record, then they couldn't report anything. And then I answered Lori's question, and I answered Andrea's question. So Sarah says, each year will we be submitting estimates and actuals? Yes. So this year it's just estimates because we're springing on this. But next year it'll be this process where in September when you do your Q4, you'll be doing estimates, and then we'll give you the end of the year to do actuals. And so this will help California Department of Education report to the feds on the their maintenance of effort to show that we're using X amount of state funding or other state funding on adult literacy programs that satisfies the supplant issue with federal funds. So that's kind of why we're setting up that process. And Lori says, Cal Regional is a partner for offering phlebotomy classes. So Lori, if there's a way to split that out, prorate it out, I would do so if you can, based on maybe enrollment or something like that. Try to use a methodology. And then Nicole, if Jessica was looking for in-kind, where would that go on the NOVA input sheet?
For the in-kind reporting, sorry, I had to unmute myself. Let me go back to that screen. So at the bottom of the page under leverage funds, you'll see a section that says add another fund, and there would be a drop-down list that would, once you click on the list, the drop-down window, then a list will pop up. And here in my screenshot, I kind of tried to show that. So you can see the in-kind contributions here. And this, once you select this, it'll then add it to that table. Did that answer the question? Okay.
Yeah, and Jessica, you can respond if that wasn't helpful, but I'm sure Nicole knows her Nova. Jessica asks, between now and February, I could in essence be populating and only click Save Estimates, but by February 15th, I need to click on Submit Actuals. Is that correct, Nicole? Nicole, are you with us? We might have lost Nicole.
It it looks like she's speaking, but
Hi, can you hear me now?
okay, there she goes.
That was weird. Okay. Sorry about that. Yes, so from the way I understand it is that you can type in your information, you can save it as estimates, and you can always go back and change it, and unsave the estimates, and then go back in and submit your actuals, and then you should be able to unsubmit your actuals too, up until the time that the actuals are certified by the consortium lead. So you do have the ability to kind of go back in and update as needed.
Okay,
Okay.
yeah, thank you, Nicole. I'm going to try to get Sherry's question answered. We did have a question into the TAP email box about independent studies. So because the state doesn't have for K-12 adult a policy on independent studies, the best we could do is how top CASAS would look at it. And here's our response based on CASAS and looking at the TOPS-Pro system. Independent study model tracks hours are similar to what we've always done with distance learning, where students accrue hours without necessarily being in the classroom or being with the teacher. We don't have any calculated look at this process for independent studies, unfortunately, with distance learning. But what we could do is use the distance learning model for calculating hours, absent of that policy. So, Sherry, what you could do if you want more specificity on this and how we're tracking distance learning in TOPS-Pro, you could contact CASAS, specifically Jay Wright at CASAS. I think it's Jay Wright, WRIGHT at CASAS.org, and he can provide you some strategies on that distance learning model that they track in TOPS-Pro. Okay, and then JC says, for 17-18, estimates and actual can be the same, correct? Yes. This is kind of the first year, so we're, one submission date, combining the estimates and actuals, because the system was set up in Nova for the process that we're going to use next year. So sorry about that. And Lori says, please define in kind. So like Lori, like Jessica said, use of classroom. So let's say you're an adult school and you're using a church or a workforce center or a government building, and they're letting you use the classroom as an in-kind contribution. So the space use or the rental use of that facility would be an in-kind. Or if they're sending somebody to you free of charge, that's kind of an in-kind contribution to help, with a class or something like that. Let's see. So Wendy says, what if you have students enrolled in multiple program areas? How do you log those hours? So Wendy, the CASAS report will break out those hours of instruction by program area. What you could do is you could look at your attendance system. You can look at TOPS-Pro. They do track, what they call students in multiple programs, the duplicated count. And so they are tracking those hours. And Emma says, I just checked in Nova. That member does have the optional status. Okay. And then Marianne says, you can only track hours if they are enrolled in a course. So job development services would be in other program which tracks dates, but not hours. Okay, so in Marianne's case, you might want to go back to your attendance system and compare that to your TOPS Pro system to see if there's a big difference. And then you could adjust your hours as such.
Neil?
Sorry, technical difficulty there. Can you still hear me?
All right. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, and then Kathy says, if they do not report any hours, will we still be able to certify in the end? So Nicole, let's say in the report they submit 0, that's still certifiable, correct?
Yes, we don't have any requirements as far as what they submit. So you should be able to submit whatever your information is.
Okay, and then Francisca says in-kind would include buildings, utilities, or only volunteers. So Francisca, that would include any kind of in-kind contributions that you think that assisted you in running your program. So it wouldn't be limited to a select number. We would accept any kind of in-kind contribution. We know it's going to be difficult to try to calculate that, so at some point you're going to have to draw the line of your in-kind contributions. I mean, we don't want you spending an inordinate amount of time trying to track down every little piece, but if you can give us a good idea of the cost of running the program, that gives the legislature a good idea of what we're talking about, so that it's not just the 521 million. We're talking that it's somewhat bigger than that. So do your best, and that's why this year we're looking at estimates. We're going to try to get better at this, and we'll probably have more guidance and maybe standardization and methodologies for next year, we hope. And that's what the report will highlight as well. So thank you for your question. So Marianne says, sounds like job development services funded by Title I or IV would not be reported because we don't track by hours. However, we can track work-based learning funded by these WIOA programs because they do track hours for those. Am I correct? So let's see. We can track work-based learning funded by these WIOA. So if there's any system, Marianne, that you're using, even at a partner site, that can give you these hours, you can add that to your total. So we're not saying like you have to only use the TOPS Pro system, or you only can use your attendance system, or if you're a college, we're only using the 320 report. These are just options, but what you put into Nova could be a combination, because that probably is one of the things we want to highlight to the people doing the analysis, and we're going to try to set up interviews for some of you to talk about this process, to say, when we're figuring out hours of instruction, I'm leaving my partner information on the table, or a lot of stuff that's not 12 hours or more is being left out. Those kind of things we want to make sure are in the report, so we identify some of these areas that when we're trying to do this accounting of hours of instruction, we're recognizing all those kind of barriers or things that we didn't consider when we went through this exercise. So I think it's great that we're identifying a lot of these things, and we'll set up a process where we can, do a brain dump or some kind of gather that information from you to find out, so we can educate our legislative members about just how complex and complicated this can be, these exercises. And Judy Martrude, who is going to be helping us on that, speaking of, she's going to get a copy of this transcript. And Veronica, will you be able to download today's chat? Because I think there's a lot of real good information in there that Judy could use. Is that possible? Veronica, are you there?
Yes,
Okay, she
I
said.
typed in the chat. I'll download it as soon as we're done.
Okay, there you go. So rest assured, people, your voices are being heard. We do have one of the people that are working on the report to the legislature, Judy Mortrude. She's been listening as well. So a lot of these things that you've been highlighting, discussion, that we've been having, she's being made aware of that as well, and so we'll be able to capture that. Thank you so much. Okay, so Vivian asks, I went on to Nova to look at the actual page. There's not a drop-down menu on leverage fund page for members in my consortia. Are the pages still in progress? Nicole, what do you think?
So if it's a situation where you can't find your consortia in the list, it could be because your consortia still has an outstanding 1819 CFAD and that's not completed. So if that's a situation, then that's likely the cause. If not, please let me know. If it's a situation where you're not able to enter or edit the information, I did forget to mention that only member representatives can enter information and submit the information. So you want to make sure that you're a member representative. If those two things still don't help you, please contact me or contact us through the TAP support page.
Okay, and Nicole, don't go too far. Marisol says, can the consortia lead uncertified if a member needs to make any changes for this reporting?
Yes, they should. This report is not locked down. It doesn't have kind of the weight that the expenditure reporting does, so it shouldn't be locked down. You should be able to uncertify as needed.
Okay, thank you. And then Jennifer says, as for reporting of actuals, I'd like to say that February is actually a good date to report prior year or previous year's numbers. In our case, we have quite a few dollars that come in late, like CalWorks and corrections. Reentry is always late. And if you have the power to chime in on this date, February would ensure all actuals will be posted. So Judy will get a copy of the chat, and that's something we will let California Department of Education know that what you're going to get if you have a hard date of December, you'll be missing out on some of those fund sources. So they'll be aware of that. So thank you, Jennifer, for pointing that out. Let's see. And Francisca says, you just answered my question. And I'm sorry about disappearing. I'm back. So David said, what are service hours? So David, service hours would be those students that come in. They're what we call reportable individuals. They're 1 hour or more. Some of these students might not have enrolled in a program. They might have been tested, assessed. You might have their name and birth date and other demographics, but they might not have showed up after the assessment, or they went to an orientation, or maybe they went to see a counselor and then they didn't come back. And so you spent some time, maybe 3 or 4 hours on them, or they could have gone to a workshop, which is less than 12 hours. And so that's something we'll have to look at in TOPS Pro of how we're recording those hours in TOPS Pro for services. And I think that's something that I think in the beginning we thought wasn't a big issue because we were focused on 12 hours or more for reporting students. But when we're asking for total hours of instruction, and if the legislature is thinking about building some kind of average daily attendance model, how do we get the truer number of hours for services and instruction? So what I would do possibly, if your attendance system was capturing this, you could look at that and compare that to the TOPS Pro numbers and see if there's a discrepancy. So Anna says, what happens if a person is in multiple program areas? So TOPS Pro calculates the hours by program area. And so their report would show, let's say I'm enrolled in an ESL class and a CTE class. Unless the program is contextualized, and that'll be like a TOPS Pro question asked. So how do you, and it would depend on how you reported that into TOPS Pro as well. But TOPS Pros, you're able to separate out if someone's in multiple programs. So we're not tracking individual students, we're just tracking total hours. Okay, and Lori said, so it's okay not to match the 17-18 budget. Yes, you should. Hopefully you're blowing past that 17-18 adult ed budget and showing us twice as much, possibly, because, hopefully not everyone runs just on their AEP budget. Hopefully they get a little bit from the district. The district gives some in-kind, maybe get some LCFF, maybe have a little WIOA 2, maybe you got some county CalWorks, maybe you get some fees. So those kind of things we'd want to see. How good will this is from Bill, how good would this information be when each agency will use a different approach to calculate in-kind? Someone could go big, someone could go conservative. So, Bill, since we've never done this before, we have to start somewhere. And these will be highlighted in the report. And it does take a lot of effort to standardize stuff. So I think we'll also mention that in the report. And so, this is year one, like we said. And we don't want to be heavy-handed, but we do want to have some kind of, starting point. I don't even want to say baseline. I just want to say starting point to get people used to this. So I think this will be a ongoing process that we'll refine each and every year, but we do have to start somewhere. Marianne said, this is helpful because I need to update and prep partners so they can share information on the hours of service provided. Right, and Marianne, this will maybe inform our data systems on what we need to track and what's important. And if we were missing the service hours, then that's something we want to make them aware of. And Margaret says, so only the member reps can enter this information. Nicole, how does that work in Nova? Can only members access their own account?
Yes, so any Nova user can navigate to the page, but if you need to be able to enter information and submit it, then your user role has to be a member representative associated with that district.
So Nicole, if I was the primary, I couldn't enter information in for that member, or could I?
I don't think so. I think you have to be the member representative for that member district to be able to do so. But that is something I can check on.
Okay.
I know the primary contacts kind of have some additional privileges on behalf of their consortia, so I can check on that.
Okay, well, we'll find out. I mean, so in some cases, we might get some holes or gaps. Some members might not be reporting. I mean, it's only as good as the data you're submitting. Like Bill said, we are going to have some variation in this report. And Kathy's question about, this program that had job developers that wasn't tracking hours, they might be reporting 0 because they weren't aware of the need to, track this. So I think it's good that we identify some of these gaps. You're not going to be penalized. We're not going to say, hey, you didn't report anything or you reported this lot. We're collecting the data to inform people, and we're doing the report to inform the people of some of the flaws in our processes and some of the needs that we need to, fix things or provide guidance or better instruction or standardization, those kind of things. And since this is the first go-around, I'm sure there'll be a lot of areas where we have variance, have, like we said, a non-standardized approach. But if we are going to create one system, the adult ed system, I think these are the kind of issues we have to bring to the surface, highlight, and then deal with them. So I think it's a good exercise, and don't think that you have to get it perfect. So Eileen says, what if I say CalWorks only pays every other year for the past year and current year? How to report the carryover year? So Eileen, if you think you use these funds in 17-18, you could estimate that, do a proration. So it's what you think you spent in 17-18. So there'd have to be some kind of methodology you use to calculate that. And Lovey says, we already report in kind for WIO2. Would this be similar? Yeah, I think it would be very similar to WIO2. I know WIO2 doesn't ask for fees, but you could use that in kind calculation because you're running the same adult ed program. Now, WIO2 does include CTE, so you might want to factor in those non-WIOA programs as well. But I think, Lovey, that would be a good baseline to start from. So thank you for that suggestion. And Sally says, we use our district's facility use fees to calculate in-kind for classrooms. Good. So there is, I think districts do have methodologies out there, and I think they'll vary from district to district. There's no standard way, but I mean, there's generally accepted accounting principles, and a lot of this stuff is probably uniform, but it might vary a little bit from district to district. And Jessica agrees. Jennifer says, I hope that all the numbers reported are explainable and supported by ledgers and MOUs, etc. Yeah, we would hope so. That's why we're kind of doing estimates this year. Next year will be more like actuals. So we want to introduce this. We'll highlight kind of the caveats and problems that we see, and then we'll make recommendations, and hopefully we refine this process where we get to the point where we have a real good process and it is backed up by those ledgers and explainable and supported documentation. So thank you, Jennifer, for that. All right. And Andrea says, can there be more than one member representative per member? That's a Nicole question. So Nicole, in NOVA, what's the member representation for?
You can have multiple member representatives. You can have multiple consortia contacts. There's no limit on the number of contacts and users that you have added to your consortia or to your district. And I also want to note, I think it's Alicia's comment about, can we have the member contacts enter information and the member reps be able to submit? And I will talk to the developers about that. We do have the member contact role, which has limited functionality. So I will talk to the developers about adding those same roles to this function where the member contacts can enter and edit information, but then the member representative is the only one that can submit.
All right, thanks, Nicole. And Bill's going to be able to show all his hard work he's doing outside of his AEP funds, and I know he is doing a lot of extra work. And I think, so DeHara said, when is the 17 estimate due? So for this year, everything's due February 15th, 2019. Next year, it'll be a little shorter time frame, and we'll go over that, but I don't want to confuse people. So really the date that we're focusing on is February 15th, 2019. So with that said, we've got about 20 minutes, and we have Nicole on the line. So if anybody has any other NOVA questions that you've been dying to ask Nicole, or just questions in general, we'll be happy to answer as many as we can in the next 15 minutes. And so I'll work the chat, and if questions come up that are specific to NOVA, we can have Nicole answer that. We'll have her get on the mic really quickly. So Andrea says, so by February 15th, the actuals for 17-18 and estimates Okay, so just to clarify for Andrea, so by February 15th, 2019, the 17-18 breakdown of hours of instruction and operational costs are due in the system. You don't have to do any 18-19 stuff until later in the year. 18-19 we won't even look at until as the earliest would be September for estimates. So that's a whole other process. So really all you have to do is worry about is February 15th to get your 17-18 information in. So that gives you at least 2 full months of talking to people, trying to figure this out. But remember, we said you can use estimates, you can prorate, you can use various reports. So don't try to make this perfect the first go around, but we want to get close to the bullseye if we can. Okay, so here's a Nicole question. I'll let Nicole read it and respond because I've been talking a lot. Nicole, are you with us? Okay, well, Nicole.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Oh, there she is. Yeah, okay. Do you want to read Emma's question?
Yes, my mic's kind of acting up, so sorry about that. So Emma's question is, Nicole, just to clarify, as we begin to work on the work plan, we only build the budget for the CFAD total dollar amount, and any one-time funding will get worked in separate, correct? Well, I think what you mean, so you have, for your 18-19 budget, it equals your total available funds, which equals your remaining balance from 17-18 as calculated when you reported your quarter 4 report for 17-18. That amount is added to your 18-19 allocation as identified in the 18-19 CFAD, and that equals the total budget or total available funds, and that's what we are asking you to build your budget against. If you have any one-time changes or dollar amounts that you're moving around among members, you would then do that in the form of an allocation amendment. Once you do the allocation amendment, it will then populate the amounts that you've added or deducted from your members in those members' 18-19 budgets. If their budgets have already been certified, it will automatically put it back into draft status because NOVA is recognizing that they need to do a budget revision to account for either the increase in funding or the decrease in funding. So hopefully I answered that question, but basically through the CFAD process and through the allocation amendment process, that's how you demonstrate allocating funds to your members and moving funds around. And then it automatically then populates into your total available funds for the budget.
Great, and I see a couple of people typing, Nicole. So, so if you have any real tough NOVA questions that you want to see if Nicole can, you want to stump Nicole. She's been handling hundreds of NOVA inquiries, and so here's one from Eileen.
Okay, so the one-time COLA, we had to handle that differently whether you were a direct funded consortia or if you were a fiscal agent consortia. Because of the timing in getting the payment information process, we really didn't have a lot of time for direct funded consortia to figure out where we're going to put those extra dollars. So we did send a separate email and we sent communications to the consortia leads to let them know this is the extra amount that's being awarded to your consortia. We recommended allocating those additional dollars based on the proportional share of how the original COLA was allocated. We got feedback from everybody, and then we then updated the CFADs for all of the consortia that are direct funded with those amounts. If your consortia was a fiscal agent, because we didn't need to know what member was getting what funds because the fiscal agent is actually receiving the payment, we then reopened the CFAD process for all consortia that are fiscal agents for them to then revise their CFAD and put and allocate the additional funds as they needed. And we were the fiscal agent consortia, because of the way they're funded, we were able to be more flexible and give them more time because that does not affect payments from the state. So with all that said, the additional COLA dollars should already be reflected in your CFAD. And once you complete your 18-19 CFAD, that will then be reflected in the members' 18-19 budgets.
So Nicole, just follow-up question. Do we still have some consortia that have not factored their COLA in or added it to their members' allocation that still need to do so, or has that all been completed?
Last I checked, this was late last week. We still had about 11 or 12. We had a combination of some who had gone in there and they actually moved money around, so they accounted for the extra funds, but they just haven't submitted it to their members, or all of their members haven't approved. And then we do have a handful that have not yet started that process, and so their 18-19 CFAT still shows a remaining balance. That remaining balance is the additional COLA amount that we received in the trailer bill, and that amount needs to be allocated or given to your members. And we do need to have that completed as soon as possible, and I believe that not having your 18-19 CFAD completed will impact your ability to submit your 18-19 budget.
So I guess the moral of the story, Nicole, is stay on top of your NOVA or it will come back to haunt you.
That's true. This year was kind of a tricky year. We had a lot of things change on us. The extra money was nice. The timing was terrible. So, all of the consortia at one point did have their CFADs completed, but this extra COLA kind of threw us off.
So would you be advocating for more money in the form of a COLA next year, Nicole?
It would be good to know ahead of time, and I'll just leave it at that. But of course, you don't want to turn money away.
Right. Okay. Well, I think we got all the questions answered and a couple of extra ones. I don't know, Nicole, any last thoughts or things that you're working on or reminders that you want to share before we turn it over to Veronica?
Yes, since we are on the topic of the NOVA general questions, I do understand we have had kind of we have a small subset of consortia and members that have been experiencing technical issues. Some of them are related to the system and the way when we launched the update on October 15th and we converted the 16-17 carryover amount into an allocation so that we can calculate the FIFO. It did disrupt a handful of consortia and cause some kind of weird things to happen. We do have all of those issues logged, and we're working diligently with the developers to get that rectified. And I can say right now, no one's issue has been rectified just yet, but we are working on it, and we do have a tracker or a log to track everything. And we also have some issues where we need to correct the carryover amount that was entered, and the quarter 4 report information, we're working on those corrections as well. And also just a reminder, right now the way NOVA works is once the quarter 4 reports are certified, it essentially locks down the information. And the reason that is the case is because that information then factors into the programming for the next year's budget and the FIFO calculations. And from what I understand from the developers, it gets very complicated to build the ability in the system to uncertify the quarter 4 report. So that needs to be kind of a clear cut in time, point in time that can be locked down. We realized that we did not give enough runway time or share this information with enough time so that folks could understand that once you certify the quarter 4 reports, if there's any corrections that need to be made, it's locked down. We are working with the developers to make those corrections manually in the database. And I'm always advocating and working with them for kind of better, smoother processes moving forward. So please stay tuned, and thank you so much for your patience as we are working through all of these issues. And one other thing, due dates. If you are experiencing technical issues, we will work with you on the due dates. Our goal is not meant to be punitive, especially if you're dealing with issues that are outside of your control and the system is just not allowing you to complete your reporting.
Great. Thanks, Nicole. I see a couple of people typing. We'll bring Veronica in to wrap up. Wait, Andrea has one quick question. We have members who did not receive funds in 17-18, but they are listed. Nicole, does that sound familiar?
They should be listed. They should have next to their name a note that says optional. If that's not the case, please let me know and I will share that with the developers. But their reporting for the program area should be optional if they did not receive funds in that year. It does not say optional. Okay, I'll check into that. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Thank you, Andrea. We'll figure it out, but they won't have to report if they did not receive funds in 17-18. We'll make sure the system reflects that. And we appreciate that email or chat information. So let's turn it over to Veronica, and I'd like to thank Nicole for her expertise today, and Veronica for her behind-the-scene expertise, as well as Holly, who also helps Veronica on these webinars. And thank you, all of you who participated today. And we look forward to hearing or seeing some of you on Friday for the 3-year plan webinar. And I'll turn it over to Veronica.
Thank you, Neil, and thank you everyone for participating in today's webinar. I have posted the URL to register for Friday's webinar. It's an overview of the final 3-year planning template, guidance, and tools. So if you haven't registered for that webinar, please be sure to do so using the following link. I will post the webinar recording as well as the PowerPoint presentation shortly after this webinar, and so you'll be able to find that information on the California Adult Education website. It's going to be located under Professional Learning and Fiscal Data Reporting, excuse me. So please be sure to look for that information. I'm posting the URL for that as well. Thank you all very much for your time. Once I close the webinar, an evaluation will appear. Please be sure to let Nicole and Neil know what you thought of today's webinar, as well as if you have additional technical assistance or professional development needs. Again, thank you all very much for your time, and I hope everyone have a great afternoon.